Io non sono Foxy Knoxy. Io sono Amanda Knox.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear the thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic community in true crime. Well, this proves that emotional Amanda Knox has been watching social media's reaction to her reconviction like a hawk. It's amazing that after being reconvicted, Amanda Knox hasn't addressed her indignation to the English-speaking media. That's not because she's too upset to talk or think about it, because as we see here, she was quick to criticize an influential journalist directly, and of course, she wasn't too upset to talk to Italian media. It is interesting, I think, that always outspoken, no longer waiting to be heard Knox has returned from Italy and allowed others to defend her instead, including her father.
Can you believe this is still going on?
No, it's very different. The United States judicial system and the Italian judicial system are very different.
Amanda's also allowed Solicitor to defend her instead.
I think that the court wanted to punish her or me or whatever in this case because they really believe she is guilty.
But it's not a very long list thus far. During my investigation into Knox's long journey through Italian courts, the thing that struck me, the thing that is probably by far the strangest aspect to her case, but also the least acknowledged, the least remembered, the least talked about, is the slick PR strategy employed to get her where she needed to go. And you know, ultimately, it worked like a charm. Do you know what I'm talking about? Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. If you're a big fan of Amanda Knox, please dislike, despair, leave a shitty comment, and let's get started. Now, at one point, perhaps in an unguarded moment, Amanda Knox's father described the best move they ever made, words to that effect, was hiring a PR heavy hitter within something like 9 days, I think it was, of the incident. Who does that? Who, after being accused of murder, goes to a PR firm? Now, I know what you're thinking. You may say, you've got a gripe against Knox for some unfathomable reason, and you're just trying to find anything you can to criticize her with. Really? Let's go to October 21, 2011, 13 years ago. And this is what the dude in charge, Marriott, said, the dude in charge of her PR said at the time. Our job was to try to correct the misconceptions out there about who Amanda Knox was. Oh, okay, so there are misconceptions and you're trying to correct it in court, in the courtroom, or in the media? I mean, isn't that what courtrooms are for, to correct misconceptions? 7 years after Marriott made this statement, during a kind of victory march at the time, Knox herself paid tribute to Marriott in a long-forgotten tribute published in an obscure PR publication. It's titled Amanda Knox's Tribute to David Marriott, April 30th, 2018. These are her words. Life can change in an instant. David Marriott, of all people, understood that. You'll be plodding along on the humble path you worked so hard to lay out for yourself, and then suddenly something unexpected will spin everything out of control, will take you over and redefine you. It was at one of these moments that David came into my life. From the get-go, so she doesn't actually say I was accused of murder. I was accused of the murder of someone who stayed in a house with me and was actually in the room right next door to me, just gives these sort of generic things. Who would describe being accused of murder as something unexpected that's spinning out of control. It's quite interesting she uses the word spin. She goes on to say, from the get-go, my trials in Italy could not be divorced from the media. Character assassination was the primary weapon yielded against me in both courts, the courts of law and the court of public opinion. Can you see how she's equating the two? My lawyers, Carlo Dalla Vedova and Luciano Girga, fiercely defended me in one arena, and David Marriott fiercely defended me in the other. Oh, the irony. Someone convicted of slander, reconvicted, claiming to be the victim of character assassination. Oh, the irony of someone who benefited handsomely from having her character embellished in the media and ultimately getting the richest publishing deal in publishing history at the time, $4 million, complaining about having her character assassinated. Lumumba's character was assassinated. And what did that mean? Well, he lost his home, his business, his life in Perugia, and his name. Who had a hand in that? How did that happen? Did he hire PR big shot to undo the reputational damage done to him? Was the damage undone? Well, did he ever return to Perugia? Did he ever reopen his bar, Le Chic, in Perugia? Knox goes on to write, David was a shield, not a sword. He protected my family by managing the hundreds of media inquiries that flooded them over the years. In doing so, he empowered them. Without his help and guidance, my family wouldn't have been able to juggle their own lives while also saving mine. Without his warmth and care, my family and I would have been swallowed up by the mob, condemned together to undeserving infamy. So what do you think? Do you think she's giving him tremendous priority in what happened to her in her life, in the outcome of these trials? She goes on to write, his service to my family during the most profoundly difficult period of our lives made him a part of our family. And at this other life-changing moment of his passing, remember this is kind of a tribute, when David Marriott died, she says, I wish to offer ourselves as evidence of his positive influence in the world. He was a man of genuine kindness and strength, and he will be missed by all of us. Signed, Amanda Knox. But what this really is someone saying, I was convicted, I was accused of murder, I was convicted of murder, and then acquitted, and then I was convicted of murder again. This guy got me off the hook. Thanks so much. Thanks for doing that for me. Well, it seems like Knox herself gives Marriott massive credit for what he did to help and protect her. So, if I'm saying, did PR help her? And you saying, how dare you say such a thing? She's saying it herself. She's saying that Marriott, via managing and manipulating the media, was a tremendous asset to Team Knox. So let me ask you, again, does Knox herself not consciously give credit to PR for changing the outcome of this case? Yes or no? Is she not consciously doing that now, like in 2024? What I'm saying is she not consciously employing PR strategies in terms of a response to a legal situation? And if she is, if there's a clever, carefully considered strategy to stick to, and if that's going on in the background, what are we to make of Knox apparently seeming overwhelmed and distraught on an Italian television camera? Remember a moment ago I suggested a counter to my position on this is that one might simply say, he's just, for some unknown reason, we got some sort of agenda, blah, blah, blah. Well, no. In 2014, the PR narrative, as I say, very underestimated in this case, got a real shot in the arm in this excellent analysis from HuffPost's Celine Nelson. And before I read it, I will put a link to it in the description. Please do read it. It's an excellent analysis. Let's be absolutely clear what we're talking about. We're not saying that good PR is just, wow, you just put out some positive press about someone. We're saying that isn't PR in the context of a murder trial something that is patently dishonest and manipulative and kind of sly? Well, let's see what Celine Nelson writes. She says, when Knox was painted as a manipulative sexual deviant by certain parts of the press, Gogarty Marriott, that's a public relations firm, was tasked with altering public sentiment. That was their goal. Change public sentiment. Sounds pretty harmless, doesn't it? The information coming in from Perugia was painstakingly filtered while an Italian smear campaign was cultivated. What does that mean? No American journalists were given access to the Knox family without guarantees of positive coverage. Still think that this is good and honest. Thus, Knox was turned from promiscuous schemer to naive college girl. And isn't that how you think of her, as a naive college girl? Promiscuous schemer to naive college girl, railroaded by ruthless Italians driven by their consuming hatred for anything American. During Knox's, these are my words now, during Knox's second trial, effectively, after her initial murder conviction, Knox's dress code and appearance were studiously altered to make her more palatable to the Italians, something we saw again these last few days where it wasn't Amanda Knox that appeared in court, but rather someone else dressed up like an Italian Mary Poppins. If the outgoing, liberal, nonconformist Knox suddenly appeared buttoned up and toned down in Italy, well, apparently her better half hadn't gotten the memo. Anyway, let's go back to HuffPost. Celine writes, you have to hand it to them, Gogarty Marriott did a pretty good job way back when. Though by no means unanimous, support for Knox in the US media remains relatively high, with the same tired, easily disproven arguments still thrown around in the news. In other words, these arguments entered the mainstream media narrative, but they're actually easily disprovable. And these are some of the favorites that she highlights. Favorites include the remarkable claim that there's, quote, there's no evidence, end quote. That's incorrect. That Knox's false accusation of her employer came only after hours of abuse. That's also false. And that the drifter, Rudy Gaudet, confessed to the murder and acted alone, only implicating Knox after being offered a plea deal. That's fabricated. But don't stop there, Celine. Let's get into some real huffing and puffing. The article goes on to note, what's troubling about this is the intensity of the deceit. So again, are we saying that the public relations is harmless, that it's simply just being positive? Well, not if you take that word deceit literally, because then we're talking about peddling lies. It's not just manipulating and so on. It's actually spreading information that's not true. Allegedly, right? It's one thing to drum up support by having friends and family talk about the real Knox. It's quite another, these are the words in the article, it's quite another to knowingly hawk appalling untruths and propagate them through the media. Absolutely. She goes on to write, in the face of recent and important case developments, much of the US media remains curiously silent. In July, Knox's connection to a Peruvian cocaine ring was made public. I'm just reading from the article. There are a couple of links in the article. I guess one can follow them. But the article goes on to note, according to police reports from 2008, Knox had a sexual relationship with a cocaine dealer and contacted him in the days before and after Kirch's murder. In a case where sex and drug use are so contentious, one might imagine this was noteworthy, but the mainstream media in the US were silent. Considerable time, effort, and money has gone into portraying Knox as a wholesome girl next door and Celestito a shy, well-behaved doctor's son. Stories that threaten to shatter these carefully constructed PR images are just brushed under the carpet. And so who is collaborating in that campaign, in that artifice? And this is what makes the Knox narrative really so terrifying. It's how many people behind the scenes are complicit in spreading a manufactured narrative. And if HuffPost is right, I mean, you need to use your own critical thinking. Read the information, check the information. Are they right? If they are right, well then it's not just a manufactured narrative that is at play here, but a false narrative. So when someone is on trial for murder, right, is a false narrative being recycled in the media? Is it or not? The article goes on to note, in a case that hinges on a staged burglary, how many American publications reported on Knox's own damning admission this year that she faked a break-in in Seattle months before leaving for Perugia? How many reported on a previous encounter with police, or Celestito's for that matter? How many dared to mention Celestito's obsession with knives, alleged encounters with animal porn looks like, or admiration for a particular serial killer? Members of Celestito's family recently stated on Italian TV that they think Knox may be guilty, key information that again was stifled in the US. In July, Celestito held a press conference in which he withdrew his alibi for Knox. And I think we're talking about some years ago. When was this? What's the date of this article? I think it's 2011. The Seattle Times interpreted this press conference quite differently. Their coverage was titled, Amanda Knox's ex-beau, Evidence Points to My Innocence, and inexplicably made no mention of Celestito's alibi withdrawal. Whatever your stance on guilt or innocence, this is an outrageous concealment of vital information. Now, think about what we're dealing with here. If you go back to the events in terms of the days after Meredith's murder, the circumstances that seem to lead to Knox being drawn out, and that where she ultimately defames Patrick, are that Celestito withdraws his alibi. That's what she was apparently told. That is what he apparently did. And then you say, I'm aghast. That is not true. And the police lied to Knox and etc., except he then goes and gives a press conference and does exactly that years later, when obviously he's trying to fight a conviction and decides on a particular strategy. And what does he do? He withdraws his alibi again. He seems to be doing that, and the American media simply ignore that. It is an outrageous concealment of vital information. Again, look at the words that are being used here. Outrageous concealment of vital information. Are you telling me that when we're dealing with this whole PR game, it's honest and it's harmless? It's all about the truth, the fight for truth and justice. Think about what Knox has just been reconvicted of. She told a story that turned out to be blurrily untrue, but that's only one side of the sword. If what she said wasn't true, what was true? An outrageous concealment of vital information. It's also important to note that of the original 3 suspects, Two had top dollar paid for public relations at their beck and call, and look how their story ended. The third suspect had no PR, and look what happened to him. He went to prison. He was the only one who went to prison for those murder charges. The HuffPost article continues, it isn't just Knox's heavyweight PR team who are proliferating these untruths. She accuses Knox of doing it as well. The article notes that Knox recently wrote on her own website, Raffaele's solicitor and I have happy, healthy histories and no criminal record. Rudy Gaudet was an orphan turned drug dealer and burglar. Now, contrary to sensationalist reporting, again, this is from the HuffPost, this is not a case about sex or drugs or Satanism. This is a case about controlling and manipulating image. How much easier it is to manipulate your image when you have the power to control it. How much easier it is to blame a black drug-dealing drifter with a criminal record than to face unsettling truths. I'm not going to deal with this whole charge, but Rudy Gaudet was not an orphan. And as for the rest of it, it's quite interesting that she accuses him of crimes that he was never convicted for, burglaries and so on. Now, while I was writing the script, I was trying to find a website. I knew that this existed, but I couldn't find it online. I was trying to find a website where Kurt Knox described hiring Marriott as the best decision they ever made, but I couldn't find it. It seemed to have been scrubbed online. Just another sign of, cleaning up the media narrative. In 2011, ABC News also touched on Knox's PR narrative in an article titled, Amanda Knox's family likely spent millions for her acquittal, say experts. This is an excerpt from the article. 2 years ago, Knox's father said, between Amanda's mother and myself, we have spent over $1 million so far. We have literally mortgaged everything and used our retirement funds, Kurt Knox said in October 2009. But we do what it takes because we are not leaving our daughter in a foreign prison for something she didn't do. Quick question. Surely if the truth is self-evident, it doesn't need millions of dollars to get where it needs to go. Look at Lumumba. He finally got justice without spending millions. Oh, here it is. Here's that article. And we have it because a small, invisible little publication that derives their content from elsewhere republished it. I'll provide that link in the description. So here it is. Quote, yet for Knox and her family, Marriott was as important a player in her ordeal as anyone in the courtroom. As Knox's publicist, beginning 3 days after her arrest, well, that's fast moving, Marriott worked to convince the international public that she did not murder her British roommate while studying in Perugia. And then here it is. Hiring him, David Marriott, was one of the smartest things we ever did, said Kurt Knox, Amanda's father. One really has to ask whether Patrick Lumumba called it years ago when he described Knox as a fantastic actress. Well, wasn't someone feeding her lines? Wasn't someone giving her outfits to wear? She was perhaps a dream client for Marriott, but of course Marriott is no longer there. The article notes, quote, by targeting specific news organizations to tell the family's story, Marriott eventually helped reshaped how the world saw the young American. And the question then is, this reshaping, is that showing us the real person, or is it showing us a manufactured version of the real person? This latest verdict has done a little to unshape the narrative that so much money went into, which one has to say tries to turn the whole thing, right? A lot of this PR narrative, this PR strategy is about trying to turn the whole thing into a political chess game, feeding into people's biases. Inferior Italy being jealous about American hegemony for some unknown reason, right? Rather than what it really was. and attempt to strong-arm the legal process by using the might of the American media. I'm not going to take it further than that. Look out for the next deep dive in the Huerman series. Deep dive number 5, it's dealing with the ogre's odious psychology, so look out for that. From Myrtle Beach, my last day here, thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.